Welcome everyone to the Q&A session for our upcoming course, Become a Wind Alchemist, the 7-week journey to find your magnetic north with time-bending practices and wind spirits. I'm Lisa Bonis, and I'm really looking forward to hosting this Q&A conversation for the Shift Network, where we'll explore the teachings of Renee Baribeau and address questions about her upcoming 7-week course, Become a Wind Alchemist, which begins Wednesday, December 11th. And a little later, I'll explain how you can participate in the course, even if you can't attend the live sessions. That's not a problem at all. But first, I want to introduce our guest. Renee Baribeau is the practical shaman, a wind whistler, and a Hay House author. Since 2013, Renee has worked for Foundations Recovery Network, a national system of residential treatment facilities, as marketing and community outreach coordinator. Renee developed the Awakening Compass, which is featured in her book, Winds of Spirit. She's also a featured contributing blogger for Elephant Journal. And she has contributed chapters to the anthologies Pearls of Wisdom, 30 Inspirational Ideas to Live Your Best Life Now, and The 5 Principles of Everything. And in just a few minutes, we're going to open up for your questions. But first, I want to welcome Renee, who's going to begin our time together by leading us in an opening practice. Welcome, Renee. It's a delight to have you with us this evening.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for hosting this and for your enthusiasm about the wind work.
It is. It's fascinating. So you are going to go ahead and open this with sort of a little ritual.
I am. And so before we got started, I pulled a Wind of Spirit card, and I don't know if you can see it there, but the wind that I pulled up was Tate, the Lakota Sioux, the messenger, and it's about listening with your hearts, which gives me 2 inspirations right away when I call into this wind, is that when you're listening to the answers today, let's open up our hearts and listen to our hearts, because some of what I say might not make the most logical sense, but if you can open up your hearts and your spirits to this work, it may inspire you in a way that you didn't even know. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call to this wind, and I'm going to invite the wind in to work with us for these answers, so that we answer all the questions that are the heart-centered questions that can help you understand this work, and that can bring us all present and all centered here today. So on the first wind breath, which I'm going to use this wind whistle, will be to ground yourself to the earth. It's so many of us coming home from work and a long day. So really see yourself letting everything go, grounding into the earth. And then that second wind breath, imagine inviting Tate, this Lakota wind spirit, into your heart so that you can listen with an open heart. And then in the third one, we're going to create a big energy bubble around us all to create a sacred space here tonight, so that all these questions are sacred always, but that we remind ourselves that we're in sacred space together. So if you're ready, close your eyes. Ground your feet. If your feet are crossed, maybe you want to unwrap them, and then ground yourself into the earth. Bring in a wind breath, and as we exhale it, imagine it going deep into the belly of the mother, connecting at the very core of the earth center. Now let's call to Tate together. And now we're going to create a big energy, what they call in Peru a popo, an energy bubble around this big sacred circle that we're creating here tonight on this call. Welcome, everyone.
All right. Wow. Thank you, Renee. That's so fun. I love that. What do you call that? It's not a whistle. What do you call that?
Well, it is a whistle. Can you see it? It's a wind whistle, and they're made handmade by a man studying anthropology right outside of Mexico City, and he makes it specifically for this work. And when we first started to ship them from Mexico over to the United States, the same time they uncovered Icatel's wind temple in Mexico City when they raised the supermarket. So they're very special, and this is very powerful, very potent work that we're doing here.
Wow, that's fascinating. Oh, I can't wait to hear more. And for everybody who's watching, we have the rest of our time together to address your questions for Renee as we prepare for her upcoming course. Again, it's called Become a Wind Alchemist, and it begins Wednesday, December 11th. That's a week from today. And if you want to check out the website and learn more about the 7-week course, you can visit becomeawindalchemist.com to see the full description and to register if you'd like. So let's go ahead and get started with some questions. If you have a question for Renee, you can go ahead and just type it in, and I'll be happy to read them aloud. And in the meantime, we've already got some questions waiting, so let's go ahead and get started with some of those. And let's start out with a foundational one that I think a lot of people will be helped by, and it's just, can a beginner take the Wind Alchemy class, or are there prerequisites? Do you have to be a shaman? Go ahead.
When I was first writing the book, I thought, wow, everybody in the world is going to be able to do this work, and they're going to invite the wind in. And lo and behold, not everyone thought it. People thought I was a little bit out there with this, but beginners, advanced shamanic practitioners, and people who aren't even related to shamanism can take this work. Let me tell you, you deserve to invite the wind into your life. And what does that mean? So for an entry-level student, you're going to have the experience that meets you where you're at. And so the wind isn't going to hand out more than you can handle. It might feel a little bit, oh, can I do this? Or, am I ready? But absolutely you're ready, because it's time. We all chose to be here right now at this time and space called now. And as this world is doing what it's doing, and in some traditions they call it a Pachacuti, other traditions call it the end of time, my feeling is that we all chose to be here right now. And what better time than right now to engage the winds of spirit that we haven't had access to for tens of thousands of years, because the information was hidden and lost, and it was quietly being worked some places, but not everyone didn't have access. And what the winds told me is they want everyone to understand that when you learn to cooperate with the winds of spirit, that your life is going to begin to change. You're going to be able to align to your magnetic north, and which means you're going to be able to have ideas and beliefs that you can align to physically. You're going to make the changes. Like one wind believer, she found out, oh, my word, I had a food thing that I didn't even know was going on. The winds got her there. Another one had a health issue that had been lying dormant, but it brought it up so that it could be healed, so that then you can be of service to this changing times that we're living in. For people who have done more advanced shamanic practices, don't think that this is going to be a basic course that you're not going to enjoy, because adding wind to your bag of tricks, your medicine, to your healing practices is something that can help with your clients or yourself expedite, so that when you allow the wind to fill your sail, you're going to get to where you're going a lot faster. And those people who have never had any shamanic practices at all, we start with the basics. The first week, I'm going to go over terminology. We're going to start at the beginning, because every time we start at the beginning, the winds teach me something new too. And everyone who's been taking this wind work and doing these wind work practices with me for a few years, every single time we go through, we all learn something new again. So we come here with beginner's minds. And so the beginners in the class are almost the ones that I cherish, because they come to it, ask questions that are so important that, as you go down 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the road, you just assume that everyone knows. So actually going back to the basics has always been even more enlightening for me, as well as, more advanced students, and I'm sure for you as well.
Okay, great. So come one, come all. Wonderful. That's good to know. I love this next question because I've wondered about this one myself. It says, the winds of change is an expression I've always heard, but never given much thought to. What are your thoughts on the winds of change?
Where I started with this work was that I started with the metaphors for the wind first, because when I started looking at the compass, and then I'm there like, well, this is interesting. They're all pointed in the wind. All the 360-degree compass points are wind points. And the curiosity of this took me to Google searching wind. And then I started to find these slogans, winds of change, on and on and on, that if you start to look for them, somebody just shared a lot of them yesterday on one of the Facebook walls. And I was thinking to myself, like, oh, well, isn't this a great windfall? Isn't this a great metaphor? And as I kept going further, I'm thinking, like, so why has our change in our financial situation, why has this always been related to the wind? And what happened, the further I went with the work, I started to realize, wow, this isn't a metaphor. Well, it is a metaphor. Mary Poppins did come in on an east wind and leave on a west wind, but it's more than a metaphor. It's actually an energy, a consciousness that has been on this planet since the get-go, that when we start to understand, it can help us transform our lives, situations, our pocketbooks and stuff like that, because there's been an energy to these words forever that we can now rely upon and use in order to make significant changes in our lives.
Okay, great. Thank you. This next question comes as a response to the conversation that you had recently with Stephen Dinan. Most of the people who are watching this now have probably seen that conversation. So Joyce says, since listening to your presentation, I've been practicing calling the wind in a very basic but sincere way. I notice that my breathing shifts and becomes so free and deep when I do this. Why does this happen?
Well, you might remember when I was talking to Stephen that I said that we are us humans are spiritual beings having this in the body experience. And how we get into the body is by taking that first wind breath in upon our birth. And we leave this human experience taking that last wind breath out, that then reconnects us to, everything in the cosmos. And so when we start to pay attention to this breath that connects us to everything, because think about it, we live in a closed system. The same wind that was here at creation 4 billion years ago is the same wind that we're breathing now. So it's a consciousness and it's a form. So when you sincerely, what you said, which I loved, call to these winds, and they then to start to breathe them in, they are excited to work with you. They are excited to shift your consciousness, because that's what's called for right now in the times that we are living in. It's a shift of consciousness. The old consciousness that we were working with is no longer working, and we see this evidence everywhere. So I could get into that, but it's you know what I'm talking about, I hope. However, so when you breathe in, you're breathing in the possibility of this new conscious breath that is going to connect you with everything, everybody, and all of the energies that we need in order to live on this planet in a more conscious, more respectable, more transparent way. And so the winds are like showing you how they work. And just this simple breathing in, breathing out, you're getting a taste of the possibility of what can happen when you start working with these wind spirits.
Okay, thank you. We've got a couple different people asking a similar question, so let me sort of make it into one big thing. People are asking about being afraid of the wind. One person says, I've always loved breezes, but hated wind. And another person says, I would love to use the wind, but it scares me. And I can even relate to this because sometimes the wind is just marvelous. It's a wonderful thing. I used to live in Florida, and during hurricanes, as long as they weren't like, the full blast, we used to go outside and just stand in the wind and let it blow us. But then there are other times when the wind truly is terrifying. So what is it? What makes the difference, do you think?
Well, what you were doing as children, Lisa, was that you were giving yourself wind baths, naturally going out and using the power and the force of the wind to cleanse your spirit, to cleanse your soul, was very, very natural for you. Now, even if you think about a tornado that spins, in the center of that tornado is a stillness. So there's this force of nature that has both the power and the stillness in there. But on to the directness of that question, trust me, when I realized I was writing a book about the wind, I went to the bank of up on Whidbey Island, to the bank, one of the tall banks, and I went out there and I said to the wind, are you kidding me? You want me to write a book about what? The wind? People hate the wind. Who's going to read my book? Who's going to want to do this work? And this was still when the wind was quite a bit of a metaphor. And I kind of now I chuckle back to myself, thinking back to those days when I thought to myself, people aren't going to like this. And some people haven't liked it, but some of the biggest wind believers, one of my assistants was down in the Dominican Republic hating on the wind. And she kept saying, who's my next teacher? Who's my next teacher? And the winds would kick up. And so she would be laughing. It was really funny. She'd go out there and say, hey, I'm really looking for my next teacher. And the winds would whip up again. And finally, after a certain point, she kind of settled into the idea that who her next teacher was going to be with these wind spirits. And very soon afterwards, she found me, and I'm not quite sure how all that happened, because the wind calls people. If you're here listening, the wind probably called you here. But we resist, we persist what we resist. So if you're afraid of the wind, you could, or I might ask myself, what powerful healing energies live within me that I'm afraid of? What am I afraid of about my own power? If we think about the wind, it has the power to come up the eastern seaboard and level Atlantic City, what is done in New Orleans. All of these powerful forces of this wind can devastate, but imagine becoming the wind alchemist and being able to cooperate with this power and using it to transform your life, transform your pocketbook, transform your work situation. So this is so alchemical that you can start to take that fear, work with that fear, because the fear's living inside of you. The fear's not living inside of the wind. The wind is ever present, ever powerful. But what we come up against in ourselves is often the greatest teacher for the greatest transformations. I love when people say, I hate the wind, and yet they find themselves signing up for the course and they have the biggest transformations, fastest transformations, and begin to become avid wind believers.
Huh. Okay. Wow. Well, thank you. Um, we've got actually a couple questions. Again, I'm going to combine these. One is from Jenny, who wants to know: do you have a special relationship with any particular wind god or goddess, and what is that experience like? And then another person is wondering: are you going to write another book about wind gods and goddesses?
Mm. Well, those are two great questions. Do I have a special relationship with any of the winds? Well, there's some I'm really fond of. That it's kind of funny in the wind sack, and wind is carried in bags. If you look at like Fang Bobo, you see them carrying wind on their back by you, and so there's some winds that I've tended to pull out of my wind bag way more frequently than other winds. So, like Tate, the Lakota Sioux wind, the messenger that I pulled tonight, that one comes quite frequently for me. But certain wind gods like Enlil, who is the Mesopotamia wind god, who wiped out civilization when they got too noisy and too greedy and all of that. I haven't pulled Enlil out of the bag too often. Shu, who's a wind of separator. So there's some of those more masculine Mesopotamian tablet type of winds that I don't seem to have as much of a relationship with as some of the more divine feminine winds like the Basque wind Mari, who comes if you're lost and you call to her 3 times, Mari, Mari, Mari. She comes, and she comes like a gentle caress for me. And when the first time that once I realized that these winds were energies and they were more than just a metaphor, and it happened when I was working one-on-one with a client, then as I started to call them, like I was doing a webinar, and this was long before I started teaching it because I didn't know what else to do with it. And so I called to Hulda, and all of a sudden my screen door slammed, and there felt like a force field in my living room, like, come on, let's get to work type of energy. And I'm like, taken aback. And so there's some winds that come like with that. And I know that in some of the wind programs, there's people who've been working with Oya this year, and she's a force that she will actually burn you down if you're not in integrity. And she loves to support women in commerce, but she will take anything that's out of integrity right away. So sometimes, like, we think that we want to, that these winds are here for, us personally, and sometimes they are. But one of the things that I've learned about working with these wind spirits, and for those people who really want to be more of service in the world, is they're really concerned with where we are in a community. And that's very shamanic, that the shamans were always concerned about, how the livestock were, whether the community could, survive over a long period of time, how the food sources were. So what I find with these winds is that they're really more concerned with that I'm living in right relationship to the world and the planet around me than my own selfish needs. And that's not to say that my needs won't be taken care of, because, when like I said, when I first started writing this book, I'm thinking, like, who's going to read a book about the wind? And next thing you know, Hay House is publishing the book. So, I think in my own little small mind, we think that we have so much control over things. But if you know that a windstorm comes through your town or a big fire comes through your community, you really see that in the real big scheme of things, that the little things are important, okay, but the bigger thing is how do we grow and how do we thrive as a community together, which I think are some of the more pressing questions for today. I think the idea that we can just live independently and, be in our own little worlds is a very disconnected notion. And the winds are all about connecting us so that we can be in harmony, so that we can live in harmony, and so that we can, ensure the future of ourselves, our family, our community, and this planet. So they're here to help us. And I believe that they come at times of major transformation, which is a thing that we're in right now. So these winds of change are we're in a significant period of change. We're not in like, just, and actually we're going into a new decade. So what an awesome time to start to work with the winds and bring in this new decade of energy where we're more aligned to nature, to ourselves, to our community, and to the world as a whole.
Okay. The second question was, are you going to be writing about other wind gods? This person is saying, I'm particularly wondering about Odin, Yahweh, and I believe it's pronounced Hanuman.
So Hanuman is Vayu's, Vayu is the son of Hanuman, okay? And so Vayu's story in this book is about, I love the Vayu story because there's a story about who is stronger, the wind or the serpent. And the Vayu and the serpent, they're having this fight about who is the stronger of the two energy. And so the serpent wraps itself around the mountain, and the wind blows, and the wind blows, and the serpent wraps itself tighter and tighter and tighter around the mountain, and the wind keeps blowing. Finally, the mountaintop blows right off and lands into the sea. And so it's a standoff that we're all powerful, that we all bring our gifts to the world. So whether or not I will write a book about more wind gods, because there was about 150 that I found on my first research, I took the ones that I could find the most about. And as far as Yahweh, I really tried to stay clear of political religious as much as I could, because Yahweh, Nirvana, Holy Spirit, Ruach are wind. And in my shamanic cosmology, I want to know, was the wind so powerful that these religions borrowed from the wind to write their cosmology? Well, in that time period, what happened was we lost our direct relationship to the wind. And all of a sudden, we were in temples and churches and synagogues asking for a priest or an intermediary to interpret the messages. And what I found from these wind spirits is that they want you to go directly to them. And for years, I was seeking. And now whenever I have information that I need, I go directly to a wind. So what's kind of happening in terms of other books coming up? Yes, there's more books, probably a few. And some of them are not specifically about the wind gods and goddesses per se. Like I may do a deck of cards with more winds on them. I always visualize 64 winds in the deck for the compass points. I thought that would be a nice number. And so this one has 32, and then 2 with no wind, because no winds are actually spots on the compass where the wind doesn't blow at all, which also with Homer, the wind never, where the gods live, the wind never blew there. So there's this place of nirvana and no wind where we have peace, and there's, it's considered. So it's kind of curious that all of these winds are also related to these bigger gods. And I don't know, other than these 64, whether I'd go there, because there's so many more interesting things besides for those. I mean, that could be a lifetime of research. However, the winds were also there at every creation story. So a part that really fascinates me is that these wind dynamics of creation, like how you create anything is how you create everything. So Some winds are about chaos, some winds are about process order, some winds are about partnering with nature, some winds are oppositional forces, like when the winds blow this way, and some winds are about gestation. So for me, I think the next book is really about exploring how we create, because this is alchemy. If you understand how you create from energy into form, just think you can do anything you want in your life. Yes, we'll bring in more wind gods and people will probably expand my relationship to them. And as I learn more, because remember, a lot of these were hidden, like Yelena, the Turkish wind goddess. You can't, when you go to Turkey, which is a Muslim country, you can't find any information on her. So the winds that are in this book revealed themselves to me as wanting to be in the book. And there's like a Latvian wind mother who I couldn't find any information in English about this Latvian wind mother. And right before I said I got to take her out of the book, a 50-page doctorate thesis in English appeared out of the blue on a Latvian website. And so the ones that are in this book revealed themselves. So are 32 more going to reveal themselves to me before the next book comes out? I don't know. But the more people who come and play with me on this, I think that the more we're going to uncover these wind spirits and the more we're going to learn about how we can do our future without repeating our history and in a way that's way more in integrity than we're seeing now.
All right, that's a great story. I love how the translation just happened to show up right when you needed it. I love when that happens. Yeah,
that's how these winds work.
Yeah, it just sort of blew into your desk, didn't it? Perfect. Those of you who are just joining us, we're here with Renee Baribeau learning about her upcoming course, Become a Wind Alchemist, which begins on Wednesday, December 11th. And you can log on to becomeawindalchemist.com for all the details and to register. So let's get back into some questions here. We have another person asking about, again, the conversation that you had recently with Stephen. Asking about the, I don't know if you would call it a ritual or not, maybe you can refresh people's memories, where you had us write in the air and then the wind took it away. So the question is, 2 days after your intro session where we wrote in the air and asked the wind to resolve or remove a problem for us, the wind came mightily to my house for 2 days straight. What does that mean?
That's a great question. When we did this, I prefaced writing in the air something that was just a little nagging, nothing too big, nothing too profound, nothing with roots so far into your life. And perhaps my guess is what I'm reading into this is that whatever that you wrote into the air that might have been bothering you in that moment had deeper roots that went further into the earth and needed a lot more clearing. So when we blew to Feng Popo, Madame Feng Popo came down on her tiger and collected that energetic thought form that you had written in there into her sack. So sometimes when we remove, think about it like we pull off a Band-Aid off of a scab or something like that. All of a sudden, this is now exposed to the air. So what we think that we're just removing a thought that's connected to a much deeper root, then all of a sudden we can the flower starts to peek through, and we've just barely touched the surface of that, so that the wind is there. So my guess also is that for this person is that the wind is trying to get your attention. And if you haven't already signed up for this class, you might want to, because you might not have been believing enough. Oh, this couldn't be real. Because trust me, every single time things came up for me when I was doing this work, that just didn't happen. And sure enough, my friends started to laugh at me after a while. It was just like, why wouldn't you think that that would happen? Because that's how the winds communicate with you. So some of us, we really need the wind to whip through our house, knock over, a lamp in order to say, oh, maybe there's something here. And I know for me in my life, like one time I was going to take out some of the winds out of the book. Oh, speaking of which wind I was going to take out of the book, I was going to take Tate out of the book. And I don't feel like going into the whole reasons why I was going to take Tate out of the book, but I just wanted to be, Tate's about opposition, and I just didn't want any opposition, okay? So I'm there like, well, Tate's coming out. So then I decided I was going to pull some wind cards I was going to make business card with wind cards so people could start to get familiar with them, because the book took 5 or 6 years to write. And I put 3 cards that I was going to put on business cards. And what do you think comes out of, at this time they were paper scraps, Tate. And it was just like, no, I don't want Tate. Well, think about in our lives the lessons we get when they're like, no, not that. But say we asked for, I want a new job, or I want a new relationship. And then, but there's still an old job or an old relationship hanging up over on the, in the closet still. And so what does the wind have to do? The wind has to come in, shake the dust loose so that then you're ready for what's next, because scientifically, wind moves from condensed areas into areas where there's expansion. So say you want a relationship and your life is so packed full that there's no space for it, and then you start to create some spaciousness. So for me, like if I wanted spaciousness, all of a sudden some old friendships leave. Not for any reason. People move away or they got a different job somewhere else. But it creates room for something new to come in. So this wind blowing through your house or through your property was probably saying, okay, if that idea is going to go, we need some room around it so that you can get some new ideas, new thoughts, new feelings, new physical behaviors, and new spiritual practices. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, actually. Thank you for that. That makes a tremendous amount of sense. I appreciate the response. I'm sure the person who asked the question does as well. I'm looking at the time here, and we have time for a few more questions, but this might be a good time to go ahead and give a few details about the course itself, because I'm getting questions about that as well, and I'll go ahead and answer those. Once again, the course is called Become a Wind Alchemist. And this is going to be 7 weeks with Renee, where you'll create a new map for your life guided by the wind's transformative energies. And the 7-week course takes place on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, starting Wednesday, December 11th. And if you can't join us live, as I mentioned earlier, that's fine. You won't miss the teachings because we supply you with audio and video recordings. You can download them. You can play them on your MP3 or on your phone, whatever you use, transcripts and all course handouts on your course homepage. And also, I'd like to remind everyone that we offer a no-risk money-back guarantee on all of our courses, and we'll be giving you until January 8th in this case to make sure that you absolutely love it. And as an added option, all participants are welcome to connect in a private Facebook community group so you can stay connected with one another. Also, everyone who registers receives the Become a Wind Alchemist bonus collection. First, you'll receive an audio recording from Evelyn Riesdyk entitled Shamanic Journey with Wind and Raven. Then you'll get an exclusive video recording of the 2019 I Am Winter Solstice Symposium event with Renee Baribeau. You'll also receive a video dialogue with Sandra Ingerman and Heather Ash Amara entitled Staying Centered in Times of Change, Holding and Sharing Your Light with the World. And when you register by midnight Pacific on Thursday, December 5th, you'll receive this extra gift. That is a video dialogue with Sandra Ingerman entitled Invoking Dreams for Healing. All right, so before we get back into questions, Renee, what are you most looking forward to sharing in your upcoming course? I'm sure there's plenty, but let's narrow it down to one thing. What's your favorite thing?
Wow, that's really hard. I'm very, very excited about taking people to Hulda. We were talking about Hulda a little bit earlier, where she actually came into my living room early on into my wind teachings. Well, she has, there's a bog up in northern Germany, which I'm really excited to go visit really in person next year. And she, on maidens, but we want men and we want women because, back in the day, that's what they would do, went to her bog when they wanted to birth a new idea or have an actual physical birth. So part of this work is that we're going to do a journey into her cave, because she travels all up and down through the caves, and we're going to leave a land, we're going to leave a altar mark, we're going to leave our altar there, and we're going to connect it to an external altar that we're going to be assembling, so that we can go in and out of linear and nonlinear time during this work, where we're going to actually look at our own personal inventories of what we've done up to date in our life. Because when we look at where we are and how we have created, it gives us a signpost, like the post we're going to leave in the cave. It gives us a guiding place to look at, like a business does an inventory of themselves, so they can see next year, oh, look, we've increased our employees, we've doubled our income, we've done this. But if we don't know where we're starting from, it's really, really hard to know if we're halfway to where we're going, or if we're 3/4 of the way to where we want to get. So what we're going to do is, in December, we're going to actually create a base, and we're going to invite Hulda in to help us birth something new for 2020, so that we're looking at where we are now in December, and then next December, you're going to have actually a marker to know, like, how it went for you. And I love that because, I'm the practical shaman, so I want these tools for transformation to be measurable. And what better way to measure it than to see where we are now, so that we can get bearings for where we're going.
Well, that sounds like fun. And it sort of relates to a question that somebody was asking. Are there special tools that are needed for a wind altar? What do you use?
Well, we're going to start with, it all depends. It's a lot of learning to develop your intuition. Like last year when I was making my wind altar, and I was making a nice thing in the inside of my home with, some of my sculptures and some of my statues and my rocks and, all of that. I was told that I needed to go outside and connect that inside altar to an outside altar. And that was really kind of very indicative. So we started to do that. We started to make an indoor altar, an outdoor altar. And these could be like, a pile of stones that are meaningful to you. It's not like you're going to have to spend weeks during the holiday time doing this. It's symbolic. And so then what we're going to do as we progress through this is that we're going to then place a symbolic marker in this alternate time space that we're going to be traveling to during the second week of our work together, so that we're connected from the sacred time to the linear time to the external to the internal. And then after we come back in January and start shifting from this linear into a more cyclical rounded time, we're actually going to make wind flags for the next 9 months. So we're going to call to the wind spirits, And we're going to, I'm getting these great white flags that you can order, or you can make your own if you're really extra handy. And once we're prepared and once we know what goal we're trying to set, we're going to actually pull a wind spirit to work with us for each of the next 9 months, so that we're supported in our work as we move forward with this altar. And then we'll hang that somewhere, and that will become where our prayers will be taken with the wind to spirit to keep us on track.
Okay, very cool. Thank you.
Does that sound fun?
It does. I just can't wait for this class to start. This is really cool. We've got a question here that you've sort of touched on this, but let's make this clear. Kelly's wondering, do you have archetypes connected to each wind?
There are archetypes, and I never looked at them that way. But so we look at Tate is a messenger, and they're consciousness archetypes. So they're not per se not like the victim and stuff like that, but they're more about how you want to be in the world. So Ekatel is about passion. We have Oya, which is about transformation. Fujin, which is about purification. We have Mama, which is about right relationship. So they're archetypical ways of beingness in the world. Because for 10,000 years, we've been the commodity doing. Our worth has been determined about how good we were in the factories, how much we could produce in the fields. And now with high technology, and we need to learn how we want to be in the world. And so they're more about beingness than doingness. And it's funny, when you start to bring in these alchemical energetics of being, you do more with less energy. The path to that intended harbor is a lot more direct, and there's not so much sidestepping. And one of the things that I found with people who have, entered into this work, a lot of people have come who have been really stuck in their life. And I guess when you're really stuck, you're desperate to look for something. And the wind gets them moving forward in really, really significant ways. And from people starting a new business to ending something. I mean, it's kind of, not only are we going to time bend, it's a little bit mind bending how all you have to do is invite these wind spirits in to start to have a relationship, and your life starts to change and you begin to align to your magnetic north. And sometimes it's really simple and sometimes it's a little uncomfortable, but the winds will support you the entire way.
Okay, great. I'm glad you brought up the word time bending, because there are people asking. I was going to get to that, and this is a good time. What is time bending? What a great word.
One of the things, I was talking at an addiction conference about nature-based traditions as a mode of helping people who have anxiety, depression, and addiction heal. Because over the last we've been on a decline for a while, but over the last 50 years, the same decline out of the churches and organized religion, temples, all of that, have matched the time we've been spending in nature. And so we're kind of ship sailing without a sail. Our ships without a sail right now at sea, kind of lost. And part of what's happening is, in Peru, they talked about a Pachacuti, about the world turning over, or the world righting itself. And for me, what I've learned is that what this turning over means is that the linear calendar, or if you think about blocks of time, no longer serve us. Because if you think about how that production cycle is, there's a peak, which we reached a long time ago, and then we're now on a decline. And so we could start to think that we have no more value, Or we could start to think that if we bend time, and what we're going to do in this class is we're going to actually take that linear timeline that we work on in December, that we germinate with Hulda over those 2 weeks where we don't have class. Then we're going to come back and we're going to actually take those significant events that popped out on our timeline, really showed us that they're up and juicy for us. And then we're going to start to put them on a more cyclical calendar so that we can start to notice whether these significant events, so say, for example, like you've been trying to start a new job, and comes every summer you try to start a new job. Well, and maybe it didn't work out for you to do it in the summer. Maybe the best time for you to start a new job is in the winter. So what you're going to start to see is when we start to move that from a linear timeline into a cyclical timeline, we're going to see how those experiences worked out for you. Then when we add those dynamics of creativity, which I was telling you about, the chaos, the process order, the oppositional forces, the partnership with nature, and the gestation in here, you're going to see, like, maybe, just maybe, the reason you're trying to start a job in the summer, but you were gestating. You waited till the end of the summer when you waited a little too long, because something about gestation is if you jump too soon, you might have a premature birth, or if you wait too long, you might have a stillbirth. So what is that divine right timing on a real cycle calendar where there is birth, there's growth, there's death and decay? Because when we look at ourselves in terms of the cyclical calendar, it's not so much of what we're producing, but it's about, are we in sync with nature, and are we using all of our tools that we have in sacred time to make sure that we're aligned to a more cyclical calendar instead of the Gregorian calendar that we've been living with that is no longer working. So for me, this upturning of the world is to eliminate or to get more away from the linear timeline and move more to a cyclical timeline where we can start to live more in harmony with nature. And if we get back to nature, think if we start spending more time in nature with wind walks and some of these wind processes, then we're more connected. And then when we're more connected, we can access our information directly from spirit, because we threw away the bath and the baby and the bath water when we decided we were going to be spiritual but not religious, because we didn't have the next set of tools in place to guide us. And that's why we're seeing so many young people dying of drug addiction and so many women in their mid to 50s suffering from anxiety and depression, because we're disconnected from nature. And what better way to invite nature back into your life is to start to have a budding relationship with the wind.
Wow, that made so much sense. You blew my mind. Thank you.
Blew you right out of the water.
Absolutely. We've got a question here from someone else named Lisa. She wants to know, is wind alchemy more often used to heal ourselves individually or for world concerns?
I believe that these wind spirits revealed themselves to me at this time and space because our world is in a concern where we are facing Anthropocene, which it's the first time in, well, probably not the first time in history, but the first time in this cycle of experience that decisions we make could actually do ourselves in as a planet. And trust me, the world's been here for 4 billion years. The world will survive. Whether or not, Enlil comes back out from Mesopotamia to blow these noisy humans off the planet, that's up to us. We chose to be here now. So I believe these winds are the major transformational energies that are here to assist us to make the right choices so that we can live in planetary harmony. Do I think that we need to do our own personal work so that we can be of service to humanity? Absolutely. You can't go around the block kicking the dog and then show up at your next gathering and, tout your spiritual wisdom. No, how do you show up each and every day in your life? How do you show up in the supermarket? How do you show up in the post office? How do you show up in your interpersonal relationships? How do you show up with your family? Because for me, the awakening my spirit through this tool of the awakening compass brought me back my family. I've been having meals with people I haven't talked to in 20, 30 years. It brought me, I worked a job for 6 years where people were actually happy to see me. In my earlier days when I was misaligned, as much of a shining star and a great chef I was, people couldn't wait till the door hit me in the butt on the way out because it was all about me. So it's two-part. The winds are here to help us have global consciousness, but the only way that we're going to get there is by waking people up one person at a time. And the only person we can wake up one person at a time is ourselves. Then, when we're living as an examples of what this looks like, it's a program of attraction. People say, well, I want some of that. Because remember, how wind moves is it moves into a spaciousness. So the more spacious you are, the more you're going to attract in your life and the more that you're going to attract to you. And when you think that you're going to be bringing up other people, it's very ego-driven. And the only thing that's going to be happen is you're going to be dragged down. So this work is about first doing your personal work so that you can make a plan about what it is in your vision that you'd like to do. But 9 times out of 10, the people that I work with are visionaries who want to be of maximum service to the world and don't necessarily know how to get out of their own way to do it. And this is an expedient way to go.
Okay, great. Let's see if we can squeeze one last one in here. We're almost out of time, but this is a great question. It's how can you tell when the wind has a message? What are the signs that you look for?
One of the best ways you can do that, and just start tonight, because if you can start to do this, then you'll know for sure whether or not this class is for you. So I'm going to give you a little experiment, all right? So you go outside your house, and this one you have to do by going outside your house. So once again, let's get reconnected to nature. Go outside your house and ask the wind a question. And maybe the question could be, should I become a wind alchemist? Should I sign up for Renee's class? Wait until you feel the wind kiss you on your cheek, and then just start to walk. You don't have to think of anything special, but notice when you walk by the trees with the leaves shimmering and whether it's a windy night or not a windy night. Don't give when you think too much about a question, then you're never going to get an answer. So you kind of let that go, and then you just pay attention to the winds moving through the trees. Walk around the neighborhood, walk around a park, go up a mountain, and then I suspect you'll get an answer. Wow, the wind started to move. The wind put a feather in my path. Wow, the wind blew something down. Or the wind blew open this page of a website. You will get your answers. But the biggest thing is for a long time, I used to get messages and I didn't listen to them. So one of my friends said, well, you should start writing down those things you get on white cards. So when you think you got a message, write it down on a white card. So now I don't need those white cards because now I trust the messages I get better. However, it's become a joke over the years. Oh yeah, I wrote that down on my white card. Because I was walking by the next door neighbor's house not too long ago, and the wind said, oh, they're not coming here this winter. 2 days later, the neighbor says to me, oh, they rented out their house for the winter. So what happens is you're getting messages all the time But you have to start to trust that you're getting messages. And the way that you start to trust that you're getting messages is to reinforce the message, say, oh yeah, the wind told me that, and start to begin to pay attention to the messages that you're getting. And if this resonates with you, I'm going to see you in the Become a Wind Alchemist class.
All right, perfect. Well, this has just been such a fun conversation. I want to thank our viewers for being with us today and for all of your great questions, because you guys contribute to making this a great conversation. Once again, Become a Wind Alchemist starts Wednesday, December 11th. And again, you can visit becomeawindalchemist.com to learn more and to register. So, Renee, before you blow on to your next thing, do you have any final words for our viewers?
I really hope to see you in this class and, work with you because, I'm a no-nonsense kind of person. So if you come to me with an open heart, a willingness to change, I can guarantee you that next December, you are going to be a lot closer towards your intended harbor than you are sitting here right now, no matter where you're heading.
All right, great. Well, thank you again, Renee. It has really been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you a lot, Lisa. And I'm looking forward to the class starting with you.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it as well. And once again, I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. On behalf of all of us at the Shift Network, I wish you well and look forward to having you on this course or perhaps another one in the future. Have a great night, everyone.